Hello, this is Stephanie. Hey.
Hi there.
Sorry, I didn't see you in the waiting room right away.
Okay. Will you make me co-host so I can keep an eye on the
Yes, please.
room?
There's a few people in it. How do you know how I make you co-host?
If you click on participants, it should do a list, and then if you click on more by my name,
you're so good. Make host?
Co-host. It doesn't give co-host?
No.
Okay, do you mind making me host?
No, I don't mind.
My daughter just bumped her toe. That's good to hop on it.
Okay, it transitioned it. And we are recording and it is in gallery view, just so you know.
Great. I'm going to put it lined up. All right, Stephanie, you are on. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Aronson. I work for the SJCC, and it has been so exciting to see this experience grow over the last couple weeks as people are signing up. So thank you for coming this morning. We have another pretty day in Seattle, which is crazy, and we'll take it. And I have a couple announcements, and then I'm going to pass it to Rabbi Kate. I just wanted to note a few things coming up. But I also wanted to thank Jane for being here and also thank Rabbi Kate and Endless Opportunities for partnering and making sure that we can spread news of these virtual events bigger and wider than before. It's such an amazing thing while we're in this tough time to be able to connect and see all of your faces and to be able to share this with people who maybe live a little further away than would want to drive somewhere into the city or something like that. So while there's so many challenges, there's also some really beautiful pieces that I see in these events coming together. I have a few things I'm going to post in the chat. I won't spend too much time on it. I just wanted to give you all some links. First of all, the link to Endless Opportunities. If you aren't signed up yet, I wanted that to be right there ready for you. And also the JCC's Hanukkah lineup. There's some really fun experiences for people of all ages, including some to do with children, some to do with older children, some to do as an adult yourself. So you can check that out. And if you're able to do so or know some people who are able to do so, there is a pop-up blood drive later in December that you're welcome to sign up for. There's a big struggle going on right now with access to blood drives in the sense that they used to happen right at like high schools and in office buildings, and obviously we're not congregating like that. So if you're able to do so, please consider doing that or just spreading the word, because both of those are great pieces. And with that, I also have one more link for us, which is the Jewish Grandparents Network, which Jane sits on the board there. They are incredible, and they are constantly coming out with different blogs and different content for you all, as well as some free webinars and pieces like that. So if you want to stay updated with them, you can sign up for their newsletter. I believe they send something out once every other week, so it will not bombard your email. And with that, I'll send it to Rabbi Kate. And thank you all again. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Stephanie. When you started to say pop-up, I thought you were going to talk about the cupcakes that are happening with Trophy Cupcakes as a local shop. And the J is going to have the opportunity to get a DIY kit, which I did a little research and discovered I can pick up at a shop too if I don't want to make it over to the island. And the founder is going to walk us through decorating with her son, which sounds pretty exciting. So Thank you for all that info. I'm delighted to meet folks. I'm Rabbi Kate Spicer on staff at Temple Deher Sinai, which allows me to give the gift of my time to the greater Seattle and beyond community through the Endless Opportunities program. We're so grateful for partners like the Strom Jewish Community Center. Today took a very hands-on approach. And then we have Beth Shalom and Kol Ami and Jewish Family Service and B'nai Torah, who are official partners, and then so many others I can't name all of them. But most important are the committee members. If you are on our committee, make sure you're in gallery view and click. I have to go through 2 pages. Please wave your hand for a little while if you're on the committee so that we can see all the folks that really make this possible. Lee Weissman, I see clapping her hand. She knows from being a former speaker just what kind of dedication it takes to make all this possible. You're invited to join us next Thursday for our second EO program of December. We'll be joined by Rabbi and Rubisa Hassan of Sephardi Bichur Holim, who are going to talk to us about Hanukkah celebrations specific to Sephardi tradition, as specific as right here in Seattle's Seward Park neighborhood. So with that, I am delighted to introduce Susan Madelon, our fearless chair of Endless Opportunities, who will introduce today's speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Jane sees herself as a map maker, sketching out the routes to conflict and acceptance, to anger and to love. Coming from a family of psychiatrists, as an editor publishing books in neuroscience, and being connected to generations of psychologists, from Anna Freud to Mary Piper, Jane felt compelled to write her own books to share her insights. Her first grandchild was born the week she got an offer to publish her first book. Her writing and family have grown together. Now there are 4 grandchildren and 4 books. Jane's overarching goal is to make the turbulence of our ordinary families a little easier to manage. Welcome, Jane. Thank you. She's
mute. Thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to have had a moment to meet some of the former New Yorkers who are in this group. We moved to New York when I was 9 years old. We lived in Washington, D.C. My father was assistant to the Surgeon General. He was a doctor and a teacher of rabbis. So I have 2 strands of DNA from him. And then we moved to New York, and it was the rest of my life changed because I was so happy to be able to come and go as I liked, and to take advantage of all the wonders of a big city. And this was a time when kids could go anywhere they wanted. I was on the subway. We lived on West End Avenue. I went to the Museum of Modern Art on my own. It was a different time, and it was a good time. And there've been good times and bad times since. So here we are. If we're old enough to be grandparents, we've lived a year or 2, right? And this is our greatest strength during the time of COVID. It may feel to some of us, I didn't plan this. This is not what I took my vitamins for to live through this. But I happen to have the perspective. My mother's parents died in the flu epidemic of 1918. She was the oldest of 5, and she raised her sisters. And there was a young Hebrew teacher at the Uptown Talmud Torah who fell in love with her. And when they married, her dowry was the 4 little girls. He was lucky enough to have a job. In 1923, poor Jews, not all of them had paychecks. There was a whole lot of piecework and struggle. But so that's the story. That's the kind of background of my life. And I had no grandparents because my maternal grandparents died in 1918-19. And my father was the youngest, second to youngest of 8. And his parents were long dead by the time my brother and I were born. So I had to make it up with my own grandchildren. Or they had to teach me how to be a grandparent. And I was talking with a friend of mine today, a psychologist named Mary Piper. She wrote a book that I published called Reviving Ophelia. And we were talking about how watching our grandchildren grow, it's like, she lives in Nebraska, it's like having a garden. Each of the flowers grows in its own way. And we as grandparents can take joy in the differences of each of the flowers. When we're parents, they have to go straight, they have to be this tall, they have to have good manners. If flowers can have manners, but the grandparents, we can just love them and appreciate them, and perhaps even see them for who they really are, not for what their parents want them to be. We understand what their parents want them to be, but they get from us unconditional love, which is the title of my book. And this unconditional love, it's like miracle grow. This is the last garden analogy I will use. I've never had a garden. I've only lived in apartments, so pardon that. But it's like miracle grow. When you feel understood and loved just for who you are, you have a different view of yourself and therefore of the world. And that's the wonderful thing that we give them. Now, of course, we want them to behave, and we're supposed to follow the rules of our grown children. How many of you have ever broken a rule that your grown children set about care for the grandchildren? It's good to do that before they can talk, because once they can talk, they can rat you out, right? I had this wonderful moment. This grandson of mine, who is now, he's not shaving until some football team wins. He was the baby, and now he's got fuzz. Very upsetting. But I used to go take care of him when he was first born, before his mother went back to work, just so she could get a break 1 day a week. And one day, and of course, you can't let a baby sleep on its stomach, right? Nod, please. You can't, they'll die if they sleep on their stomach. My children survived stomach sleep, but never mind. And Benji, he was about 6 months old. And you know, when he had that little belly ache, and he was his legs were going like this, and he was retching. Well, in the living room where we were, there was one of these things which had like a blanket and then arches. And he could play with the things. I'm sure you know that. Well, I put him on his belly because I knew that if he got on his stomach, he would feel better. And because I'm so responsible, I lay next to this baby on the floor with my hand on his back so that I could feel him breathing, right? And he fell asleep. And it was just such a relief to him. And then I'm lying there on the floor, he's sleeping on his belly, and I hear the door opening. I flipped him. It didn't wake him up, but God forbid Kathy should have seen that I had him on his belly. Fortunately, everybody survived, and they survived me, which is a really good thing. So that is the wonderful, probably evolution. There's some science that says that live grandparents in the family are a very important factor in human survival. So next time you get a funny look from your grown children, think, I'm making everybody survive. Because you can't raise a family just with two parents. Never could. There's always been community. We have been until Ides of March. I figure we all had to shut our doors and stay inside. It was the 11th or 12th of March, but I call it the Ides of March, because in Shakespeare, in Julius Caesar, they say, beware the Ides of March. And we sure have had that this year. But until then, at least in the post-war era, in the early post-war era, post-World War II era, families were disappearing. Everybody was moving. Kids thought living with their parents was a disaster, and there was it got atomized. The people moved out of central cities. They went to suburbs, and the family was just not as close. This was a time in the 60s. I don't know how many of you were alive in the 60s, but in the 60s, it was your family. Your real family was your friends. That's who you wanted to be with, rather than your biological family. That changed. And now we are in a situation where I think many of us during this period of isolation have a new understanding of how important the people we love are, and how important it is for us to be in some kind of connection. That brings me to my first story, which is this spring, I went to my first Zoom bar mitzvah. And it's my daughter-in-law's cousin. Now, Kathy's maiden name is Levine. And if you know Long Island, you know there are many Levines in Long Island. And this was some cousin. And the rabbi's kippah was a New York Mets kippah. The Torah reader was standing in the kitchen, in his kitchen, with no tie on and his tallis kind of schnooky, blowing his nose when he wasn't reading. And the grandparents, it was Zoom, the grandparents were doing their thing. And something turned in me. I found myself more moved by this bar mitzvah than by so many of the bar mitzvahs I've experienced in the course of my life, because everybody on that screen was making an effort to transcend space. Now, Abraham Joshua Heschel says that Judaism is a religion that of time, that we honor time, and how we spend our time is the essence of Jewish practice. But here we were transcending space. And the bar mitzvah boy, Max, was just wonderful. And he read his speech with a piece of paper in front of his nose. Have you ever seen that? I want to thank my parents. And at the end, he was finished with everything. And the rabbi said, this is the time where we throw candy. Throw candy at the screen. And, you know, what are we going to do? And then there was a hubbub in the house, and the camera went out the front door. And there was Max's Hebrew school class, all dressed up for Shabbat, socially distanced, standing on the sidewalk throwing candy to the house. We are capable of almost anything. We are capable of survival. I've been thinking a lot about this. I think to myself, well, the Jewish people, we have undergone so many struggles in our history. The fact of the matter is that anybody who's alive today comes from a family that had struggles. We had special struggles, but everybody had family that survived the plagues. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. But this sense of survival and resilience is what is going to get us through, I think, part of what will get us through the next patch. We have 3 or 4 months more of this, maybe more. Everybody's tired of it. I can't tell what day of the week it is. Do you know what day it is? It's day. So here we are. And I think it's really important for us, this is my first lesson, to recognize how resilient, how living through being old enough to be a grandparent means that you've had ups and downs. We've all had ups and downs in our lives. Those hard times have built strength. They built resilience. Not that we handled the hard times so well, but that we survived them. So my grandparents, who died in the flu epidemic of 1918, left 5 girls. And they had children, and I have first cousins who I'm so close to, and we're here through the flu epidemic. And so that's my first point. I think it's just important to say it at the outset, because so much of our time, we're bored, we're inside, we can't do the things we want, we lack the kind of stimulation that we've built into our lives, and we may be feeling sorry for ourselves. I wake up some mornings and I just don't know how I'm going to get out of bed. But then there are mornings when the sun is out. Sun is out. And we might have the opportunity to think how lucky we are to be here. So sometimes I wiggle my toes and I move my body on my bed and I say, I'm here, time to get up. And that survival is our greatest strength. And we have so much to offer, especially the grandchildren at this time, even though we don't. How many of you see your grandchildren in person? That's great. That's a lot.
Jane, on the survey, it was less than half.
Less than half.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a lucky group. The rest the rest of us, I see my grandchildren, but they have to be masked. And I feel I'm losing them because even though we're in the same room, we're not in the same space. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about what we give them, the special things that we give them that nobody else can. And it's not ballet slippers, and it's not something from Amazon. I think the most, what I have found in my research, and I've written in my book, we are nurturing what I call their moral imagination. That's not, the moral imagination is the way we face the world and think about other people. Generosity, kindness, these are universal values. And I think that there are 4 pillars of the moral imagination, each of which we as grandparents have the opportunity to strengthen. And the first is empathy. I think it is true that you can't be empathic if you've never been empathized with. The sense of being understood and loved is a very big factor in how you process the world. So when you're sitting on the couch with a grandchild and he looks a little sad and you say, "You okay, honey?" That is more important than going to the Nutcracker. Because we all need to be seen as close as to who we are as possible and loved for it. And this unconditional love and the empathy we have for our grandchildren allows them to have empathy for others. And if there was ever a time, well, it's always been true, but we are kind of aware at the moment of how important empathy for others might be in our world. And the love of those grandparents, and they love us for who we are, not for our good grades. We love them for who they are, not the good grades. We're happy when they do well. We're happy when their parents are proud of them, but we love them anyway. And that is so important for their emotional and moral growth. The second pillar of the moral imagination is perspective. I've been talking about this since we started. We have the arc of our lives is long. The arc of justice, the arc of history bends towards justice. The arc of our lives bends toward the grandchildren. And we've been around a long time. And if there's something happening in the world, we are likely to have lived through something not unlike it. So today, in the time of COVID, how many of you were alive during the polio epidemic? Were you scared? Were you worried that you might get it? Were you worried? Were you eager for the vaccine? We've been through that. The government seems a little crazy to some people these days, but we have lived through the assassination of John Kennedy and the reign of Richard Nixon, whatever. So we have a way of living through our time, which is macerated by our experience. And that is very good for the children because their parents have never lived through a time like this. Well, their parents have never lived through the time that we lived through before they were born. And we have this wonderful history in our lives. When I was doing my research for the book, I interviewed a group of African-American grandmothers in Queens. And I asked about the stories they told. Well, they told stories of their fingers bleeding from picking cotton. They told stories of when their mama came to work for the white family, the baby was put on the back porch. they told stories of Jim Crow America to their grandchildren. That is a very good perspective for looking at where we are today. And our perspective gives them a sense that nobody's going anywhere. We're here. We're still here. We got it, and we got you, which is just so important for their ability to deal themselves with situations, not always to follow the crowd. The third pillar is knowledge. We have stories we can tell them where we lived through history and we know a lot. So when my granddaughter noticed that I was eating a diet cracker, she was feeling chubby. I explained that I like the cracker because it's tasteless and the locks really taste, you can taste the locks on this cracker. And then we got into a conversation about genetics. What can you change and what can you not change? And this was not about, Ruby, don't worry, you're going to be beautiful, you may be chubby. I was giving her information which she could then process however she needed to. And the fourth pillar is agency. And that, I mean, is what we give them a sense that they can do anything, whatever they want. Now, parents are going to worry when the daughter wants to be a Broadway star. You'll never. But one of my favorite stories from the book, a young actress in New York, always wanted to be an actress. She was studying at Juilliard, and she told me the story about her grandpa. He was a redneck. She used to spend summers with her grandparents in the South, and he had a pickup truck, and he had a tarp. He put the kids would sit on the tarp, and he'd attach a corner of the tarp to the truck, and he would drive through the fields. Of course, they would all fall off. Now, he would be in jail today, but they had a wonderful time, and nobody was hurt. And he would build a fire every night outside. And one evening she came out. It was about 8:00 at night. She came out from the house and she was crying and she was miserable. And he said, "What's the matter, darling?" And she said, "Pop, they don't want me to be an actress. They don't have any faith in me." And she was a teenager. She was just livid. And he went like this. And he looked up. And she said, "What are you doing, Pop?" And he said, "I'm seeing your name in the stars." If she ever wins an award, Pop, that sentence will be in her mind and heart. We get to do that. You want to be whatever they're interested in, whatever they want to do, we're in favor of what they like. And we get to teach them things. Part of that agency is every time we sew with them, every time you're working in the garage on woodwork or a car, every time we're canning, every time we're reading, we are strengthening their ability to do things, strengthening their agency. Now, those are the 4 pillars of the moral imagination. Did I mention a toy? Did I mention a gift? Did I mention a trip? I just mentioned being there for them. And if there's one thing we can do on Zoom or in person, is be there for them. One of the people in my book had grandparents. She lived in Brooklyn, and her grandparents lived in LA, and she saw them twice a year. Now this is to the point of, well, we don't see them as much, we're distant. She saw them twice a year. Her grandpa was a rug man, and he sold rugs. He also patched rugs, and one of his big customers was a nunnery. And so she would go with her grandpa to the nuns while he was fixing the carpet. And they had carved little animals, and they would let her play with the animals. And it was the most wonderful time for her to be with her grandpa. Grandpa and grandma were divorced. So then she'd go 1 week with grandpa, 1 week with grandma. And grandma, LA, she was a stargazer. She just loved the celebrities, and they would go to the famous drugstore in LA where they'd watch for the celebrities. And this woman is a very successful lawyer. And in her drawer is People magazine. So this is, I mean, these are just, all of us have these stories. And sometimes we don't value them in a culture that is all about going, buying and doing and going. We've had the opportunity in these last 9 months to look a little more carefully at the world in which we've been going and buying and doing. And maybe it's useful to remember that just being there for the grandkids is a gift of the greatest gift that we can offer. So that's the first part of my talk. I have a couple of other things to say about the exchange between across these two generations, and then we'll open it up for some conversation. I think it's really important to know how much they love us and how much they know we love them. Even if we don't see them all the time, even if we only write letters, even if we only Zoom, we are in their hearts, and they feel happier and better when they think of us and when they view us and when they're with us. I'm a widow, I live alone, I'm in Manhattan. I am invisible. People walk into me in the street, and it's not because they're on their phones, they just don't notice. Oh, lady. When I see one of the grandchildren, the look on the face of the grandchildren, one of them, makes me know I exist. That love is so important to us. And even if we don't get to see them and be with them, they love us. And they may not express it. This also, when they're teenagers, we lose them. You walk into the room, they're at the computer, they say, "Hi, Graham," and they go back to the computer. Okay, they still love us. And in the course of writing this book, I interviewed some people in their 20s who had whose grandparents had actually been alive when the grandchildren were grown. This is basically sunrise, sunset. And the stories I heard about the impact of grandma or grandpa on these people who were in their 20s were beautiful. And also, each one of the stories is about a pillar in their growth and development. So, we're there, and they love us and we love them, and nobody's going to take that away. And, there's nothing that can take it away. We're not going there today. And when you think about your grandparents and what they meant to you, and the taste and the smell and the sense of being loved, can't take it away. It's eternal. So that is my spiel for now. Let's talk.
Thank you so much, Jane. So we have a couple of ways we can do the interactive. You can wave your hand electronically, I think, by putting the participants list open, and then it allows you to raise hand. You can just wave your hand in your screen, and I'll keep looking at folks and call on you. Or you can put things into the chat, and Stephanie and I will make sure that the questions submitted ahead of time get put in there too. I know there was a request for sort of specific guidelines of how to make one's presence felt and known with the younger grandkids in Zoom when it's so hard to add more screen time or even have a sense of bonding. So if you can speak to that, and then Faye, you'll be next.
Okay, well, there are different, it's hard. The little ones all they want to do is jump up and down on the bed. So let them jump up and down on the bed and sing them a song. There's always reading. You can read. One of my friends has a 4-year-old grandson, and she lives in New Haven, they're in Portland, Maine. And so she reads to him a half hour ever so often, so that her daughter can have some relief from they had a baby, having 2 children to take care of all the time. So there are all the visuals. There's the screen stuff. There's Zoom. There's FaceTime. Some people prefer FaceTime. If the child is old enough to understand what's happening, they can take you on a tour of their house. They can show you things. You can show them things. You can have all kinds of play all kinds of games. Hide and seek. You can sing together. You can draw together. One of my cousins is a preschool teacher, and in the COVID, she and her class of 4-year-olds wrote a Torah. Now that's a little complicated for us, but she'd tell a story. Each of them would make a picture. The parents would send a copy of the picture, or they would show it on the screen, and then each of the children would tell a story about what this picture meant. And the parents kept the drawings, and then they glued them, pasted them together, and wrapped them around 2 sticks, and they had a Torah. We can do hide and seek. We can do puzzles. We can do games, and we can text. The teenagers seem to prefer texting. Have you noticed? Text them. So we say to ourselves, I don't like text. I like text if I can text a grandchild. Then there is something really amazing, which is a secret. It's called the US Postal Service. We can write letters. We can actually, all of us have stamps, I bet. We can actually write a letter, stamp it, put it in the mail, and they will get something they can touch and they can read and they can enjoy. And we can do whatever we please. We can paste things up, pictures on, we can write letters. A number of years ago when Benji, who is now 16, he went to camp. I guess he was 12. And I sent him a letter every day. And they were stupid. I'm here to tell you, because what can I say? Hi, Benji, I got up, I had a bagel. Well, it turned out that he got these letters every day from me, and he read them to his bunk. And, and they laughed. Well, so what? The next year I said, Benji, are you going to do that again? He said, yeah, Grandma. I said, do you really want me to write you every day? He said, yeah, Grandma. So I did it. I mean, we happen to be in the 21st century. We're starting the 3rd decade of the 21st century. So we have all this communications possibility. What I would really like from Zoom, and if there's anybody who's in tech, would you please figure out a way for me to get my cousin's chopped liver to eat, not just to look at through Zoom. But other than that, we're all here, and we can deal with all ages if we let them guide us. And it may only be for a minute, or it may be for an hour and a half. One of my friends has grandchildren in Canada, and she doesn't know when she'll see them. She lives in Nebraska. Well, one of her grandchildren really got interested in science, and so they're having real conversations. She can't believe it. It's his interest that she is responding to. So I think for children, for babies, you sing. I run some webinars for the Row Center. Somebody said, it's really great when they're little because they can't run away, because they can't walk yet. You sing, somebody puts them in a high chair and you sing to them. For teenagers, it may be harder because they are already engaged in their own worlds and struggling so to keep up a social life and all. And as far as teenagers are concerned, all I can say is you get them back sometime, just the way you got your children back. When my kids were starting to be adolescents, I had this image that we had taken a train ride across the Norwegian Alps from Oslo to Bergen. And it was a most gorgeous ride in the world. But sometimes we'd go through these structures that were put up to protect the tracks from snow, and it would get dark. And then it would be light again, and then it'd be dark. And I came away from that experience saying to myself, that's like teenagers. You're on a train and it's going to be a couple of years where they're going to be with you, and then it's going to be dark, and it's going to be light again and then dark. When you get to Oslo, they're grown and they love you again. And it's true. Their attention is their business. Our love is our business. And in the 3 generations at this point, we have to be the grown-ups. I know I hate being a grown-up. People say to me, oh, you learned a life lesson. I think, can't school be out? But if we are the grown-ups and we are mindful of what the parents of our grandchildren need, and we're imaginative and we listen to them, it'll be okay. And if it's 5 minutes, enjoy the 5 minutes. And if it's an hour and you're ready for bed after that, get on the bed. Next question.
That's great, Jane. Marty, thanks so much for modeling that we also have answers to share with one another. So please feel free to use the chat function to share what's been working for you. And Faye, thank you for putting your question in the chat, but it would be great to hear your voice. So if you could ask your question that way, please.
Sure. Yeah, you've talked a little bit about it already, but and I'm hopeful that the teenage years will pass and we will have a relationship when this is over. But in the meantime, do you have any suggestions on what's the best way of handling the relationship while they're really focused on everything but you?
Right. Write them. You won't get an answer, but you'll know they have it. Email them, send them pictures, keep in touch. Here's an example from one of my webinars. A woman had a conversation with her teenage granddaughter. She was so blue, alone. And the granddaughter said, Grandma, you have all those cartons of old stuff in your attic. Why don't you go and open them and see what's there? She did. And she found things from her grandmother. So she started taking pictures of the meaningful objects, and she texted the pictures with a little legend to the teenage grandchildren. It didn't seem to bother her that she didn't always get an answer, because she knew they had it. And knowing that you've done the act of communicating is maybe all we can ask for at this time, Faye. But do it. And whatever community, I don't know how to do TikTok and I don't know about Instagram, but if there's something that they like, maybe they'll take a minute out of their busy days to teach it to you. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you'll do it with them. And if you can't learn it, then send them a letter. I mean, we have 100, and it looks like we're going to have our post office back now that the election is over. So, we do it. And what we give them, we must understand. And this, I've been writing books now, Benji 16 and a half years. They love us, Faye. Even when they aren't returning our phone calls, even when they aren't texting. When my first book was about our relationship with grown children, walking on eggshells. I strongly recommend it. And I interviewed grown children from 25 to 55 and parents of grown children from 55 to 85. And so I sit with the grown children. This was the most interesting thing I found in this book. I'd sit with a 25-year-old and I'd say, well, tell me, And every one of them said, I love my parents. And I'm so grateful to them. Some said for the gift of life, some said for the sacrifices they made. And, they talk about that for a while. And I'd say, well, what's your relationship now? We're not speaking. We're exchanging mean emails. This was emails. It didn't matter to them what kind of the conflict that they were experiencing with their parents was not central to the fact that they love us. And they have, they're going to be, I'm still, my oldest is turning 55 on Saturday. And he's still telling me mistakes I made when he was a kid. He's the founder of StoryCorps, for God's sakes. All the wonderful things that he has accomplished, but I should not have sent him to camp. I don't know if any of you have had your children tell you what you did wrong, but if they haven't, they will.
Thank you. Some people know this. My mother and my in-laws are in the screen, so it's really great to look at the interaction of the faces.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey.
All right. We got some more answers in the chat of folks sharing what's been working for them. And if you're missing a book title or any of these details, don't worry, because we'll make sure that you get a recording, and that usually includes the chat too. And you can always email us, and we're happy to put you in touch with additional resources. So I'll look to the screens to see if anybody is waving their hand that way and wants to ask a question. It's really nice when this is interactive, and we welcome your stories as well. We had some people wondering about making a move. This is going on long enough and we're far away and isolated. And do you have any thoughts or expertise to weigh in on a move for being closer to kids and grandkids?
Yeah, it's I'll tell you stories. I don't have a generality here. One of my friends, she's actually the founder of the Tenement Museum. When her time at the Tenement Museum was over, she and her husband moved to be close to the children and grandchildren. But and then COVID happened. So the move was, it's going to all be fine, but it's been tricky because the children are in school, they can't see the children. Is it worth it? Another person in my webinar had the courage. She lived in Massachusetts, a widow in a condo, and she decided she's going to pick up and sell that condo and buy one near her grandchildren, her children and grandchildren. And she is thrilled. The problem of moving, this is a strange time. We're all frozen in space. In another time, you might move to the city where your kids are, and then and you've left everybody, and then it turns out that they're moving. So you can't. This is it's very unpredictable. We're living in a time, I mean, my God, we used to think it was unpredictable, the weather. Now everything's unpredictable. We're swimming in a sea of ignorance about what's going to happen and all. But I think the key thing for the grandparents moving is, do you imagine that you can build a new life for yourself independent of your children and grandchildren? Because they're not going to want, they may want your help now. They sure want your help now, but they may, when their lives are back spinning the way they do, they're not going to have time for you. When I walking on eggshells, I wrote this book because my kids were in their 20s and they were not returning my phone calls. And I realized that I had built for them. I wanted them to build their lives. I wanted them to be busy and independent, but it hurt my feelings when I didn't hear from them. And all my friends, same generation with grown children, were experiencing the same. So I went to write this book. In the course of writing this, my younger son was running the first senatorial campaign of Chuck Schumer. Josh was 28. It was a long time ago. And he was busy. I knew that. When he lived at home, Chuck would call at 6:30 in the morning and at midnight. And of course it would wake me up because this was landline time. Josh was living downtown now. He's working 100 hours a week. And I left him a message. Hi, Josh, this is Mom. Call me when you can. 1, 2. Hi, Josh, this is Mom. 3, Josh. The 4th call, I left him a message. Hi, Josh, this is Mom. If you don't call me today, I'm going to vote for Al D'Amato. The phone rang. And this is going to happen if you move, because once this is over, if you move, your responsibility, and you may want to do it, is to build a new community. And if that's not a possibility, I'm not sure it's such a good idea, because they are busy. Hanukkah, busy. Hanukkah is coming. Last year, I've got 2 kids. They live in New York. Each has 2 kids. I said to them a month early, we've got 8 nights. So choose a night you can all come. Sunday at 11:30 in the morning, we lit the candles because they were so busy. So I think moving is, I think I'm right. If you are ready to make the effort to set up a new life, do it. One of the people in my webinar moved to Albuquerque, something like that, to be near her son and his wife and the baby. And then the wife died. And then COVID happened. And so she and her husband had given up their life in Connecticut, and they couldn't be with the baby. Because of daycare and because the baby couldn't be with them. And now it's eased a lot, but you never know what'll happen. And they very much miss their old life. So it's a benefit or a sacrifice depending on the circumstances. You better analyze it really carefully.
Thanks, Jane. I always love hearing you speak. I've heard Jane a couple times, and one thing I always see is it's situational, and that's so hard, I know, to hear, because I think as humans we always want the right answer.
Yeah.
And that's always a challenge. But also you touched on Hanukkah briefly, and something someone had brought up was sharing Judaism with grandchildren who maybe have a multi-faith family or aren't practicing as much. And COVID or non-COVID, if grandchildren live far away, that's going to be a challenge, but especially during this time. Have you seen some innovative, or do you have some suggestions for people on sharing Judaism in general at this time?
I know a grandma who lives on the East Coast, and at 5:30 or 5 o'clock West Coast time, she calls her grandchildren and they sing the Shabbos prayers. And they have Shabbos every Friday afternoon. I have the privilege of studying with my granddaughter. This is the second child, studying for her bat mitzvah on Zoom with the tutor, the 3 of us. And when she puts the trope together with the parsha, I swear to God, my parents are in the room. It's so beautiful. She's doing this for her parents. It doesn't mean much, but we are doing it. And my other son, those kids will not be bar and bat mitzvah. His wife is Jewish, not Jewish, and they don't care. He takes them to an Orthodox synagogue in Brooklyn for the holidays, but this just isn't important to them. So I'm taking his oldest to Israel at the time of his 13th year, if we can ever travel again. My father was dean of the Hebrew Union College in New York. I was born in Cincinnati, where he was a professor of education at the HUC. And I think there are so many different ways we can be Jewish grandparents. We can be the love, we can give the love, we can give the acceptance, we can sing the songs, we can schlep them to synagogue, we can not schlep them to synagogue. All of this is part of the mix. Now, I am on the left wing of the Jewish Grandparents Network because I'm more ecumenical than many. I just think we have so much to give, and our being Jewish is a very important part of it. And we get to be who we want to be. We don't have to, we want to, who we want to be with those grandchildren. And the Jewish values, many of them are universal and a lot of them are historical. And you don't have to be, I think, now this may be heresy of this group, I don't think you have to believe in God to be a good Jewish grandparent, okay? I don't know, that may be heresy, but I think that there are so many different things and ways that we give our heritage and our Jewish heritage to the grandchildren. And I don't think we should worry about it. I think it's there.
Thank you. I actually also come from a multi-faith family. My mom's family is very Catholic, and I know something my grandma does with us when we're in person or on FaceTime is she walks around her house and talks about pieces in the house, where she got it from, the story from the artwork, why, and that to me, when I think of the artwork in my home, it's often like, I got this in Israel. Where did I get it from when I was traveling? And so I'm sharing that because that's always a fun thing we do together. And you can do it on FaceTime just as easily as in person.
That's beautiful. When I had my father's English Bible. He knew the Torah by heart. And he would make funny faces when a Torah reader would make a mistake in synagogue because he knew the whole thing. And he had the first JPS translation, 1918. And I took it to college because the Biblit professor said, bring the Bible that you study. And Benji was going to be bar mitzvah, and it was torn, but I got it put together, and he now has his great-grandfather's Bible, inscribed Abraham Franzblau, 1918.
Yeah. Lee, I see that you have your hand up. If you have a question, Rabbi Kate can unmute.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, I want to get down to the nitty-gritty. I have 5 grandchildren. 2 of them live less than a mile from me, but the others live in Atlanta. 3 girls, 2 boys. The girls are way more communicative. The one granddaughter that lives here, if I say, hi, how are things going? She says, well, and she starts and she tells me what her day was like and what this teacher said and what that teacher said. And I love every minute of it. Now, at the other end of the continuum, the 2 boys, one here and one there, you ask them, hey, how are things going? What's happening? Fine. You get one-word answers. And it's gotten to be kind of a joke because we get the one-word answers, but I'd like to know, how do I get past that? How do I actually draw them out?
Everybody who gets one-word answers from the teenage grandsons, raise your hand. I think what you do is you love them and you wait until they grow up. Those conversations, the granddaughter who's studying for her bat mitzvah, she and I talked all the time. And in the last couple of months, she turned 12 and I'm losing her. I just see her fading away. How are you doing, Ruby? Great, Grandma. I love you, Ruby. I love you too. End of conversation. I can't get a thing out of her. And I figured that that's the part of the train we're on, where they're not talking to us. Our needs, we balance with their needs. you'll get them back if you don't make them feel bad that they don't talk to you now. So every bit of self-control is what will build the future. This year, when I turned 81 in August, and the kids had put together birthday cards, and Benji, the 16-year-old who has his learner's permit, for God's sakes, a week ago I was holding him in my arms. He's gone away, and I can't do anything about it. He's in his world. So I get this card. Each of the kids wrote a card, and the parents wrote me one. And the card from Benji said, "Happy birthday, Grandma. You mean the world to me." He's not talking. And our needs are our needs. Our insecurities are our insecurities. The family that lives in Atlanta, they live a continent away. They still love you. And if you tell them, let them know how much they mean to you without demands, just there you are. The leash gets long, it's like one of those expanding leashes for a dog. I'm trying to find a dog and I can't find a dog to adopt. So I'm thinking dog images. The leash that extends, it's extended. Lee, they will come back when they feel like it. And you can't force them any more than you could force them to like baby food that they didn't like. So that kind of acceptance and self-control, it's very hard, but I think it's the way to go. Paul?
Thank you. Definitely those nitty-gritty pieces are good for us to talk about, and I welcome anyone else to raise their hand. Rabbi Kate is monitoring either physically, or you can go into your participant piece down at the bottom of your Zoom.
Paul,
Jane, I know you,
Paul Lowenberg is raising his hand.
Great. Kate, do you mind?
Paul, will you unmute?
I have to ask them to unmute Jane. We have one person ahead of Paul.
Oh, okay.
And I also want to point out that we've been online since 10:30, which means it's been 60 minutes. So this is your friendly body reminder. Needs to move and maybe stand up or do something different than just be in front of a screen. Marty and then Paul.
Okay.
Yes, Jane.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you if you feel comfortable answering this question. My question is, what have you learned about yourself through the years of writing these books?
That's a wonderful question. What I've learned is that my values, I've learned a lot about what's important to me. And what's most important to me is family. I've had an amazing career, blah, 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 blah. It's family. And so what I've learned I've written 4 books, this one about grown children. Then I wrote a book about siblings, because my brother and I for a long time didn't get along. So I wrote this book because my kids weren't answering the phone. I wrote a book about siblings, which is called Mom Still Likes You Best, because I couldn't understand why my brother and I were not close. We've become close. Thank you very much. Wrote the book, figured it out. And then I wrote a book about the impact of secrets on a family, because there were secrets in my family, in my life, that were very earthquakes. And then I wrote, and the unconditional love. I just wanted to find out how much I could learn. And I learned what I've learned is love, the power of love. What I've learned is the power of commitment. What I've learned is the power of taking your ego out of a situation. That was especially important with the walking on eggshells, because it's also important with grandchildren. We think we know how to raise children, right? We raise the parents of the grandchildren. Well, they have different ideas. And so you have to take your ego out of it and say, I'm going to learn how they're doing it. One of the things I suggested in Unconditional Love, I have a section that could have been called what to do when they're expecting. And I suggested that everybody go and read up on the current child rearing mishigas. Research it like you're going to Morocco. Do they sleep on their tummies or their backs? Do they have candy or not candy? All of those things, so that because the parents are going to believe what the authorities that they find, not us. And if we're going to have a fight over it, it's going to be hard. They're not going to be so welcoming. And we want the key to that house. So like that. And I think, oh, here's another thing I've learned. This is about age. A year and a half ago, I was turning 80, and Ruby said to me, Grandma, now that you're closer to dying, what has this made you think? And I said, it's made me realize that my time is now limited, and that I better use it to the best of my values and what's important to me. And so that's what I've learned. And Marty, the most interesting thing about it is I thought achievement, I thought career, I thought success was the most important thing. And I'm happy to have had all of that, but it doesn't compare to family.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. One of the side effects, our kids live in LA, and so we haven't seen them in a year and a half or whatever it's been. But we see them, we see them, regularly on the weekends and occasionally during the week on FaceTime. And one of the interesting things about FaceTime, and I would recommend it for people, is that it gives you a sense of intimacy talking to your children or whoever it may be, but say particularly your grandchildren, because their face is right there. When you're in the room with them, they're on their phone or they're teenagers now, but they're in the corner playing a computer game that you don't understand, or they're in their room or hanging with their friends. But when you're talking to them on FaceTime, they're like right there. And I found, it's the one way you can sort of really grab their attention, because they more or less have to pay attention to you. And I think that's a real difference than actually being there, where you're sort of, grandpa sitting in his chair over there, and, who cares if he wants to tell you about the McCarthy era or the Vietnam?
Oh, let's talk about the McCarthy era. Right.
I understand, the Marshall Plan or something like that. Yeah. And I'm kidding, but they're really not that interested in hearing your great historical perspectives of all the stuff you lived through, I found.
Right.
But when you talk to them face to face and ask them what they're doing, and what you can see them smile, you can react to them. Anyway, it's just a comment, but I think FaceTime is maybe it's the law of unintended consequences, but I think it's a good mechanism if you really can't be in the room with them.
I agree with you, Paul. Thank you for that. I think it's really, it's more intimate. And if you can catch them on FaceTime, you can also walk around. They can show you things. You can show them things. It's almost, and you're closer than, and the phone is their screen of choice.
Yeah, right.
Good.
Jane, I just wanted to share with you, I read your book, Walking on Eggshells.
Yes.
And I wanted to tell you, I did not like it. And it was very good. And it was very good. I wanted you to tell me how I could give my child the benefit of my advice without making her mad. And you told me stop giving her advice. And it has worked really well.
Good. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. They really don't like advice. They hear we're the megaphone, They hear our grown children hear us, our voices booming through their lives. And the only subterfuge that I found useful is if you praise what you like that they're doing, that may be of interest to them. But advice, they hear advice as criticism. It's like an automatic translation. So, and if you really want to tell somebody what's wrong with your daughter-in-law, call your friend.
And speaking of adult children,
Yes.
Last time we spoke, Jane, or last time I was on a talk with you, you talked a lot about having difference of opinions on safety between what you as a grandma or other people as a grandparent are comfortable with and what your kids, the grown adults, are comfortable with. Life has changed a little bit, and you did speak to how you suggest interacting with those grown adults. I just wanted to, one more time, since we are entering the winter, clearly COVID is spiking. Maybe if you have some examples or additional advice on how to have those hard conversations about what you're comfortable with versus the parents of the children and how to handle those.
If I knew the answers to all of that, I would be wise. We're in a spot where every decision we make about health, about intimacy, being together, not being together, it's weighted. On the one hand, we do not have reliable information. We only have statistics, and we don't know how reliable they are. And on the other hand, we have these strong feelings and needs. So how do we together balance the safety and the intimacy, their needs and our needs? I think the first bit of advice I have for myself and for us all is that we admit that we are drowning in a sea of ignorance. And that we face the fact that every decision about this feels like love or not love. If I want to be more careful than my kids want me to be, I don't love them. If they want me to be more careful than I want to be, they don't love me, right? So how do you take the heat out of that? Well, you try. And you have, I think the most important thing to do, now that we have a vaccine coming, is when there's conflict, agree with your kids that this isn't going to be forever. That now especially, and I'm going to say what I think. I think we are this close to getting out of the house, and we're fools to take chances. I also think that I can't help myself from taking chances. I also am sick and tired. I live alone. I am sick and tired of this apartment. It's a beautiful apartment. I'm sick of it. People say to me, what's the first thing you'll do when the vaccine is available? I say hug. So, and the children all have different needs. And when it started, my experience is when it began in March, a lot of parents found themselves being dictated to by their children. Don't go out, my kids said to me. You can't see the children. And it was as if they were taking away our car keys, which is something they do when we're a little older. And we had to listen to them, and they were adamant. And it was a shift of power. Over time, we've all adjusted to it. And I have people in the webinar who are taking care of the grandchildren because the grandchildren need daycare, no matter how dangerous it may be. And the grandma got COVID. She didn't get it from the grandchildren, they think, but there it is. It's really scary. And to fight over it seems to be adding more pain to it. So the first thing is, but when you're talking about this, you say, let's see if we can take the heat out of it. I love you and you love me, and we all want to be together in the new year, in the spring, in the summer. So let's take this pause and be kind to each other and be accepting of each other. This is not the end of the world unless we take a lot of chances and we die. So that is kind of a cop-out, I guess, but I don't have a good answer to it.
Talking through the possibilities is a wonderful answer, creating space for us to connect with one another and the research and feel empowered to make our own decisions as we put one step in front of the other. That's what we're doing. And I'm so grateful to all of you for your partnership in helping me and my family get through this. Stephanie, this was our first collaboration. I hope it is just the first of many. All of you, you'll hear from us via email. Jane's website is a wonderful resource as well. So that's been in the chat, and then that will come in the follow-up email as well. EO is on Facebook. We have a meetup. So if you're looking to connect and build some of the connection, we have the resources. So I hope you'll take advantage of them, and everyone's invited to be back next Thursday with the Hassan's for Sephardi Hanukkah celebrations. We'll leave it open for folks. We'll say goodbye to Jane for now. And if anybody wants to
Nice to meet you.
Unmute themselves, you have that possibility now.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yep. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thursday. Bye.
Bye, Susan.
Bye.